Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Category Mistake. My name is Richard Mariello, and today we're going to talk about some influential people in my life. If you've looked at my podcast on Podbean or other sites, you might see a picture of an old guy wearing glasses. His name was David Ingrassia, or is David Ingrassia. He's still here last time I knew. And he was my high school history teacher. Now, I'm not going to say that, high school history changed my life, but it kind of did. Little backstory. When I was younger, I went to public school, and in public school, I was doing good, doing on the right path. Then I got into middle school, which back then was 7th and 8th grade. 7th and 8th grade, I decided to do the opposite of what I've been doing, which was, following the rules, passing class, doing the right thing. I decided to go a little wild and crazy. So by the end of 8th grade, I had burned all my bridges. The school I was going to was not really conducive to me. And so I changed schools completely. I went to a private school that honestly I had no right going to. 2 days before the school started, I'm like, hey, I want to go there. And my parents are like, okay. At first, they just kind of let me do it. And I actually took the exam that allowed me to go to the school on the first day of school. Thankfully, I passed, and I went there, and I graduated from there. But when I went to that school, I was not exactly what you would say the good student or the right student. I was not a follower of Jesus. I was not anything, but I was going to a Christian school. Met this teacher. Kind of weird, kind of odd, kind of wonky. His name was David Ingrassia. Now, he taught history and algebra. For those who, want to multitask, I did the same thing when I taught school. I taught history, science, and technology. So kind of the same idea, go over and above what you should do just because you can. Anyway, David Ingrassia, when he taught, he didn't teach in a way I was used to. Most teachers I had were very, on this date, this happened. Next page, on this date, this happened. It was very methodical the way I'd learned. It was very textbooky the way I learned. And instead of learning history and enjoying it and figuring out why things happened the way they did, I just was told to memorize dates, and that's it. No one ever told me or taught me. Maybe I just didn't listen well, but nobody really expressed to me why these things were important. And David Ingrassia did. He kind of gave a story behind what we were learning. First day of class, he comes in, he's like, okay, we're learning about history. I'm like, okay, so far, I got this. History, good. But then he took the word history and he broke it into 2 words. His story. And that changed, it blew my mind. It was like, okay? Just completely blew my mind. Not only was history about, things that happened from beginning to end, it turned into a story which changed the way I thought about history. There was a beginning, middle, and because of that, I was able to start putting together the events of history and why I wanted to learn about them. And then he just made simple ideas come to life. It isn't just about, Christopher Columbus discovering not America, discovering the islands like Jamaica. It's not just about King Ferdinand. It's not just about Adolf Hitler. It's not just about Mussolini. It's not just about Winston Churchill, the Queen, FDR, Abraham Lincoln. There are players involved in the history of these people that most textbooks didn't talk about. They didn't talk about who made these people the way they were. Instead of just going, okay, on page 736, it says, he explained the backstory to these events. It inspired me to not just memorize dates, times, locations. It inspired me to look at the backstory of these things. And because of that, I fell in love with a subject that I hated with a fiery passion. Now, maybe I should do that in my life today, the things that I think I hated with a fiery passion. Maybe try it at a different angle, different way of looking at it, a different system. But after one day, this man made me fall in love with history. It was crazy. Throughout the year, he would come up with things and ways and tricks and little things to remember that just stuck in my mind. I mean, we were in the middle of an algebra class and he gave us this equation and it made perfect sense. And the best thing about it is when he was done with the equation, one of our students, her name was Kirsten Brown. I think she's married now. I think her last name's Snyder, but that's a different story. She said something that sticks with me today, and this was like 1989. She said, "This is too easy for my mind to comprehend." In other words, he had simplified it and made it so easy for her. She was blown away because math is hard for some people, and math was hard for her. Now I can look at an equation and my brain just goes, "Oh, it's this," and it's quick and easy and simple. I'm an oddity. I mean, I love my wife. I love my kids. A lot of them struggle with math because it doesn't come that way. And I realized in a very short amount of time, I can't teach math. I know how to do math. I can't teach it. I've tried, failed miserably. I just do shortcuts. My brain just comes up with the answer. I can't show my work. It's horrible. But Kirsten that day is like, oh my gosh. It's like, light bulb moment, and it was great. By the end of the year, we'll start with this. We dedicated our yearbook to him, of course. First year teacher, dedicated our yearbook to him. But also, they came up with a song about him. And the concept was he was not normal. He was not normal because for a lot of these kids who had gone to that school for their whole lives, K through 12, so they had been there for 8, 9 years, some of them, he was different. He wasn't just worried about curriculum. He was worried about our mental, physical, spiritual, educational well-being. He cared about not just us passing a test, but us learning to be better people. I always tell a lot of people, probably mostly my family, the good parts of me that I am today are because I was smart enough to watch and learn from this man. I've talked to him since. It's weird. I don't know if anyone else has this problem. You go and you meet a teacher that you had when you were younger and you still call them by their Mr. or Mrs. I still call him Mr. Ingrassia. It's weird to call him David. I have called him David, but it's odd. Him and his wife, beautiful people. They live in North Carolina now. But the respect I have for him is so enormous, it still feels weird to call him David Ingrassia. It's Mr. Ingrassia. My kids know him as Mr. Ingrassia. His kids are the same age as my kids, some of them. They've spent time together as adults, and yet I still call him Mr. Ingrassia. It's great. Now, it isn't just that Mr. Ingrassia / David Ingrassia taught me about history and algebra. During my time at Kennewick Christian Academy in my high school years, mostly my freshman year when I was really an outsider, I was struggling with a lot of things. I had a very broken home. My mom and stepfather were going through stupid stuff. I wasn't really a good person, and I didn't know how to be a good person. I wanted to be a good person most of the time. I wanted to be better than I was, but I didn't know how to do it. And the days where I struggled with that, I emotionally shut down. But here's what he did. He knew that physical activity, at the time basketball, even to this day when I can, basketball and activities like that repeated bouncing of the ball mentally helped me a lot. So when I was having a day, when I was having an afternoon, I was having a morning, whatever it was, and I had him for a teacher, and he could see it, which was cool. I mean, I've taught now, and I can see it sometimes with some of my students too, and maybe that's just something you pick up over the years of doing whatever you do. He would send me down to the gym, and he'd say, go shoot, go dribble, go do something like that. And I'd do it for like 10 minutes, and I'd be fine after. It just like I needed a reset, and he knew it. Now, in today's world, that happens probably more than it did in the late 80s, early 90s. Mental well-being was not as proficiently taught in that time period as it is today. Today, we're told to care about our students' feelings and to work through things and conflict resolution and all that jazz. In the 80s, it wasn't as at least I never saw it, except for with this gentleman. Not to say that I had horrible teachers. Most of my teachers in high school were amazing. They dealt with a lot of stupid that I put them through. And sometimes I was just a total butthead to them. But here's why I list this podcast as the category mistake. Here's why David Ingrassia is the picture of my profile for this podcast on certain websites, and hopefully all of them sooner than later once I figure out how to do it on all of them. Is this man made me feel like not different. Now, a lot of people are like, well, he made me feel special. See, I didn't want to feel special when I went to that school. I wanted to blend in and be normal. Now, the category mistake means I wasn't normal, and I was special, and I did stand out, and I was different. But before this time, where I was at in my life, I stood out. I was special with a capital S, but it was because I did all the wrong things. I was hanging with the quote unquote wrong people. I was doing things to make myself stand out in a negative light. In 8th grade, I was in a history class, American history, and I was failing the entire year. And my history teacher, Mrs. Ronan, she came up to me with like 2 weeks left of school basically saying, okay, so we have a final. You have to score 125 on the final to pass. Now, that's possible because you have the 100 points plus the 25 bonus points. But she's like, I don't see that happening. Now, with 2 weeks left of school, my brain was like, uh-oh. And I crammed, and I studied, and I just did everything I could, and I passed. I got 125. So I graduated with an inch to spare. But I realized at that moment, I'm doing something wrong. Then the summer came, and that summer, I did a lot of dumb things. I hung out with some people. Now, I would say they were my friends. They were people that were important to me. But they did a lot of things that were dumb, and they did it in moderation. I'm not really good at moderation. I'm 400 miles an hour till I hit a wall. And so when they had one drink, I'd have 7. If they did one thing of, smoked one joint, I'd have 5. If they took these pills, I took twice. I never could say no to more. And even to this day, I struggle with that. I always overindulge on certain things, and usually it's things that are bad for me. I wish I could overindulge in things that are good for me. I mean, right now my overindulgence is seltzer water, which I guess is better than, Mountain Dew or Red Bull. But even then, I overindulge. I have, 60 bottles of seltzer water in my house right now, and every 2 weeks I'll probably get more. And it's just crazy, but that's just the way I am. And that summer, I went way overboard. I went so overboard. I could say I nearly died. And then in September, 2 days before Labor Day, it was a Friday night, so actually 2 days before Labor Day, I did a lot. I went way overboard. And I fell asleep for like a day. During that time, and a lot of people call me crazy, and that's fine, whatever. I like being called crazy. I had a dream. And that dream, God lifted me up. He literally, I met him in the air, and he was like on a throne-ish, in a chair, whatever you want to call it. And he looked at me, and he basically said, "You're being dumb." in the nice terms. I'll make it, as PG as I can. You're being an idiot. And I'm going to give you two options. And here they are. The first option is he showed me a gymnasium with kids and students and teachers. And it said 10 years of excellence, Kennebunk Christian Academy, 1979 to 1989. Now, I've never heard of Kennebunk Christian Academy before this day. I never saw their gymnasium before this day. I didn't know any of the students before. I found out later. I knew one of them, but that's because he went to public school with me. But I didn't know anyone in this dream, not a single person. He says, you can choose this, and you have a chance to live your life the way you should, the way I want you to live it. This is the right choice, or you can do this. And then the gym floor opened, and I literally saw hell itself, I guess you could call it. Now, I didn't believe in God. I had gone to church, all that jazz, because your parents make you and all that baloney. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in hell. I didn't believe, whatever. The way I looked at it, hell was what I was living and whatever. But that was so real to me. I woke up and I looked in the yellow pages. It's called a phone book before Google. And I found the school and I called and I said, I need to go here. And they basically said, we start on Wednesday. It's Saturday. I'm like, but I need to go there. Well, come in with your parents. So I went in with my parents on a Monday. On Labor Day, they came and let me open up the school, did all the paperwork. Wednesday was the first day of school. So they start with like a chapel and a mass, or a chapel, a mass if you're Catholic, but like, a church session with all the kids come in, they're all nicely dressed and their parents are there and all that baloney, that schools do on the first day of school. And I was out of place. You knew I was out of place just because the way I looked. But after the chapel or mass, I went into the school and I took a test and I passed the test and said, okay, you can come here now. Great. I said, great, thank you. Excited. That school scared me because I didn't know anything. My whole life I'd gone to public school. I'd gone to Consolidated School, which was Kennebunk Port. I went to Park Street School, which is Kennebunk, the next town over, and then Kennebunk Middle School, or Kennebunk Junior High at the time, which was Kennebunk and Kennebunk Port together because those towns are sister towns, so they share everything. Okay, most people don't know one without the other. So my whole life, except for like 4 months, I'd been around the exact same kids in the exact same school system, really, with the exact same rules, same superintendent, same everything. In the end, I was going to a school that I never heard of with a bunch of people I didn't know, and I was scared to death. Now, what helped? The first day of school, I saw a friend that I knew from 4th grade on. His name was Adam McLeod, and his brother Kenny was there, and I knew them. Now, Adam and I had a weird friendship, I guess you call it friendship. From 4th grade on, his name is McLeod, M-A-C, mine's M-A-R, Mariello. Every time there was a competition, he'd always beat me. It was annoying. Drove me crazy. He always beat me in everything, and it just annoyed me. But he wasn't like, oh, I'm better, awesome scoreboard, selfie, all that garbage. He was polite about it. He was nice about it. He was the constant gentleman about it. And it used to drive me crazy because I'm like, just gloat. Be the worst person so I can hate you. Couldn't hate him. Horrible. Couldn't hate him. I tried so much. I couldn't hate him. Then went into high school and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to lose to this guy again. For the next 4 years, I'm losing to this guy. Great. That's what I needed to do, is lose to him again. But again, when I met him, when I got to see him there, he's like, oh my God, you're here. Amazing. Great. He was actually excited about seeing me. And at first I thought it was a facade, a fake, just trying to be nice. But it wasn't. He was a pleasant young person, and he's a pleasant older person now. But the school had people of all different, happiness, joy, anger. It was like a public school, but without the profanity, to the point. but it also was more of a close-knit family. My graduating class was 6 people. A little easier to know 6 people than 125 people. But here's the thing. My second day of school, a guy that later on turned to be, I call him a brother. He was big, he was strong, he was scary. He saw the struggle I was having with being, calm. And he literally threatened me and said, you got to stop this or I'm going to kill you. And I believed him. That person wasn't being a bully, as we'd call it today. He was trying to snap me into a reality that I needed to know. So that first year of school, I met all these people. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. And all these people genuinely cared about who I was. Not my parents, not my siblings, not my family. They cared about me. It wasn't because other than 2 people, none of them knew me. All of them thought, when I was K through 8, everyone called me Dickie. I hated it, just because I did. When I went to KC, I changed my name to Richard, which is what my name really is. But that's what I had people call me, and it was like fascinating. People actually called me the name I wanted them to call me. And it was like, I cut my hair, I changed my clothes, I changed the way I talked, the amount of attitude I gave when I talked. I changed a lot of things because I wanted to be a person that could be respected in the world. And that was difficult for me at first, but then it got easier and easier. Now let's bring this back to David Ingrassia, the man who I'm really talking about today. I think David Ingrassia saw me struggling to find who I was. And he used to tell us and teach us about, oxymorons and category mistakes. And how, there's things in this world that just don't make sense. When the old, they broke the mold idea. And he looked and he talked to me like I was an individual. I wasn't just a student. I was a person. And he explained to me how I was different than a lot of the kids there because a lot of these kids went to that school because their parents told them they needed to, or their parents said they needed to, or their parents said, you're going, or their parents were on the board, or the parents went to the church that was linked to the school, or their children's church, sponsored them, or 90% of the students, probably more than that, had no choice. I had a choice. I wanted to go there. I needed to go there. I thrived to go there. And he saw that and he's like, these kids don't know. Most of these kids don't know what you have done and what you've been through. And through all that time, you still chose every day to come here. You had to get rides. You had to figure out transportation. You had to figure out money because my parents stopped paying for it. You had to figure out how to do homework in a crazy house. You had to figure out clothing and how to afford to buy the clothes that you needed to go to school. You had to figure all that out when most of these kids, they never worry about that. Their parents just take care of it. You didn't have all that. You had just yourself. And like it or not, that makes you different. That makes you special. And it really made me feel special. It made me feel special because most of my life, I'm the middle child, which if you didn't know means that I'm probably sad, depressed, and angry all the time. But really most of my life I had been playing parts. At certain people's houses, certain people in front of certain people, I would be a certain way. And then I'd go and I'd do something else, and I'd go and do something else. I would always change who I was depending on who I needed to impress. I didn't know who I really was. I didn't care to find out who I really was. I was afraid to know who I really was. And in that time, I was allowed to be who I wanted to be. I was allowed to be me. I'm a little quirky. I'm a little off. I like to talk. I like to communicate. I like to know random things that most people don't care about. But I also like to care about people. I care to this day, like, things make me cry, things that make me upset. Um, we're sponsoring a child in Brazil, and we drove through her village without even knowing it was her village this summer when we went to Brazil. And looking at the village, I'm thinking to myself, how can these kids, how can they do this? How can they thrive in this? Well, they can't. That's the point. And that's what made me upset. But back in 89, 1990, my parents were going through a divorce. We lost our house. We moved in with my grandmother. My world was falling apart. But when I was inside those walls of Kennebunk Christian Academy on C Road in Kennebunk, I was just a student. I was safe. I had reliable teachers. I had food to eat. I didn't worry about what was happening in my world outside. I could just be me. David Ingrassia helped with that. And when I've talked to him a lot, and I've thanked him a lot. And he's always like, well, he doesn't take any credit, and it drives me crazy because we had a science teacher, of course. We had a history teacher, English teacher, a Bible teacher, all these different teachers. And all of them worked really hard. And being a teacher myself now, it's hard. It's hard. You have to be a special type of crazy to be a teacher. You do. You have to be. To be a good teacher, you have to be a special type of crazy. But this man, he didn't just make me feel special. He made everyone he taught feel special. I can talk to kids I graduated with, kids that were only there for 1 year, and they still remember this man. This is 1989. This is like 32 years ago. They still remember him. 32 years later, they still remember him. And over those 32 years, I'll reach out once in a while. We'll just start talking, and I'll be like, oh, I got to see David. I went down to North Carolina. I got to see David. They're like, who's David? Oh, Mr. Ingrassia. Oh, how's him and Mrs. Ingrassia? I'm like, we're 40 guys. We can say David and Gina. No, I can't. It still sounds weird. But this man, when I saw him last, it was in the last year. What I've realized, actually it was 2 years ago, what I realized is even today he inspires me. When I went down and talked to him, we spent the day together, me, my wife, and him, and then I went and saw him again by myself a little bit while I was down there visiting my grandson. He said something crazy to me. He says, you inspire me, and I'm taken aback, floored, whatever you want to say, by this statement, because he's like, you inspire me. The day he's like, at my funeral, I want you to talk at it. And I'm going to myself, what? And he's like, Gina, just make sure. And I said, why? He's like, because your story is why I do what I do. The way you've lived your life is all, as a teacher, I wanted for you. As a human being, that's what I wanted for you. You're doing everything and more than I could have ever hoped for when I met you all those years ago. And it's crazy to think that at that time, in 1989, he thought I could be something. Because, in 1989, I didn't think I was anything. I was, first I went to the school to avoid death, and then I got addicted to it, and like everything, I went all the way in. But all these years later, he even right now, I'm teary-eyed because this man that, I can honestly say is the closest thing to a real-life hero for me. This man says I inspired him, and I don't know why. he saw in me something I didn't see in myself, and he still does. Every week I talk into a microphone. Every week I tell you something about either myself or the way I see the world or musicals or movies or whatever else. Without this man, I wouldn't have a voice to say these things. He told me and he showed me it was okay to be different. He showed me and told me it was okay to be a little odd, to be who I wanted to be, to speak about things that maybe are a little quirky, a little different, to not just look at, the founding fathers, to look at the founding fathers and who made the founding fathers and what was going on in their lives when they were being the founding fathers. When Hamilton came out, I already knew the story. So the musical, great. The book is great. But I knew the story already. So when the book and the musical came out, I could use that to my advantage. I could teach my students, yeah, the musical says this, but let's look deeper. This is actually what happened. This is actually how it happened. And that was because he showed me that it isn't just about, the small things. It's not just about name, date, location. It's about what is going on in the background. And that's amazing to me. It's amazing that there are people out there that not only like to teach about the background, but inspire others to look into the background. I've had students now for 3 years, and some of them send me videos, and the videos like on TikTok or whatever else, and the videos are on things I've taught them where these guys are like making epiphanies about something I had taught them in 6th grade or 7th grade or 8th grade. And it makes my heart like grow, like the Grinch, 3 sizes too big, or to the normal size from him. I had a parent come up and say, my daughter she's bored because everything they're teaching her without you there this year is in a public school is stuff you already taught her. And she's kind of liking it because she feels that she's cooler and better and it's happier times. Because let's be honest, when you're a kid in school and you know the right answer and you don't have to struggle, it makes you feel good. And that's what I did. And I wouldn't have even thought that was possible in 1989. If I was being honest with myself and with the world, I would say that being a teacher was not on my radar at all until, a year later, 1990. When David taught me, he taught me that I just needed to see the world a little different. I needed to see the category of mistakes in the world. There are people in the world that are different. There are people in the world that change the world because their perspective is a little different. And the world needs a little different. If we all just stay the same and we're all just, working 9 to 5 and punching a clock or whatever else, and we're, complaining about the government, complaining about our student debt, complaining about the bills, complaining about this, we stop seeing the bright light in the sky. We stop seeing the things in the world that inspire us to be alive. Things that inspire me today are my grandchildren, my children, even though, sometimes I don't think they inspire me. My children, my grandchildren, these things inspire me. Hearing from my students, even after I left the school that I was teaching at this year, I'm getting my master's this year, so I took a year off. Hearing from my students and their parents basically saying, "Oh my gosh, Mr. M, I got it. I figured it out." That's amazing because that's what I was hoping for. I have students who listen to this podcast. Even though I tell them not to, they listen anyway. I can't stop them. And they're like, "It's so weird." I'm like, "What's weird?" Well, one, you're on you're on a podcast. And two, without you being here, I'm still learning something. I'm like, awesome, great. But it inspires me because they're excited about learning. I wasn't excited about learning till I got to high school. I wasn't excited about learning until I met David Ingrassia. I wasn't excited about history at all until I met David Ingrassia. I thought history was the most boring thing ever. But he gave me, like Shrek, he peeled back the onion. Many, many layers. Everything from, again, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, things like Caesar, Mussolini, Hitler, FDR, JFK, all these, Lyndon B. Johnson. JFK gets all the credit for civil rights when it's really Lyndon B. Johnson when he was president. He's the one who did it all. JFK gets the credit. I'd be upset if I was Lyndon Johnson, but anyway. These are things that he peeled back the onion. He peeled back the world to show me, and it was amazing. So I'm going to end with this. At the end of the year, in the yearbook, we had written a song for him. Why? I don't know, because we're crazy high schoolers. But I'll give you a little snippet. It said, a man named Ingrassia came to school. We didn't know him, but he was pretty cool. But pretty soon we all found out what the man was all about. He came to teach about history and its applications to you and me. That's it. Simple, right? We wrote a song about a teacher because he inspired us to learn a subject, and he taught us to be better people than we could ever be on our own. Now, was this God-inspired? Most likely. Was this something that, David's going to listen to this and go, this wasn't me, stop being so, I wasn't that great. Sorry, David, I win this time. He was a good man. He is a good man. And in 20, 30, 40 years, maybe some weird kid will make a podcast about me and how I inspired him. I'm hoping they do. I'd love to think that I help out one student to become a better person in their lives, in their adult lives, and maybe even change their perspective on not just life, but history and things of this world that they can change. Because we can change the world. We just have to take time to learn about the world and the things that work and the things that don't work. And if they don't work, why didn't they work? What can we do to tweak it? What can we do to change just a small thing to make the world a better place? And that's all we're looking for. So thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Ingrassia, and Gina, and Amanda, and Caroline, and David, and Joey, and I feel like I'm missing somebody. Angelina, I think that's the last one. I think I got them all. Thank you, kids, for sharing your dad, and thank you, David, for sharing your love and your support with me. Because at the time, I really needed it.